The wind cut through the green fields of Oxfordshire on that morning of June 15th, 1330, as if nature itself was greeting the arrival of a prince destined for greatness. In the majestic palace of Woodstock, among rich tapestries and flickering candlelight, Edward was born, the firstborn son of Edward III and Philippa of Hainault. His birth was not merely a dynastic event. It was an omen of conquests, glory, and, inevitably, tragedies that would shape the history of England. From his very first cry, he was not just an heir. He was a symbol of hope in turbulent times. His father, a warrior king, and his mother, a woman of keen intellect and generous heart, did not see in him merely a son, but a future commander, a leader destined to protect and expand England's dominions. His childhood was anything but ordinary. While other children played carefreely in the fields, Edward was already learning the codes of chivalry, the art of diplomacy, and above all, the rigors of combat. He rode horses before he could speak fluently, wielded swords before he understood the complexities of political alliances. His tutor, Sir Walter de Manny, a veteran of countless battles, saw in the young prince a rare spark, a fusion of raw strength and strategic intelligence. At 7, he watched his father's knights train with bright, eager eyes, absorbing every strike, every stance. By 10, he held a real blade, feeling its weight, understanding that one day, his life and the fate of many others would depend on it. His mother, Philippa, whispered to him tales of kings and conquerors, while his father shaped his mind for the inevitable, the day Edward would have to prove that he was not only a prince by birth, but a leader by merit. And so, between golden halls and training fields, between lessons in military strategy and the first glimpses of war's brutal reality, Edward grew, prepared not only to inherit a throne, but to fight for it. The winter sun barely warmed the cobblestones of the castle as the great hall filled with the sound of drums and the reverent murmurs of the gathered nobles. It was the year 1343, and there, among banners embroidered with golden lions and the cold gleam of polished armor, a boy of only 13 knelt before the king. His eyes, dark as the storm before battle, reflected not fear, but determination. Edward, firstborn of King Edward III, was no longer merely a prince by birth. In that moment, he became the Prince of Wales, the official heir to the throne of England. The ceremony, steeped in symbolism and tradition, marked the beginning of a new chapter. The king, his father, held the princely coronet high before placing it firmly upon his son's head, as if transferring not just a title, but an expectation. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The barons, dukes, and knights understood the weight of that appointment. In medieval England, being the heir was not just a privilege, it was a burden. To be the Prince of Wales meant more than sitting beside the king at banquets. It meant leading armies, inspiring men, and, when the time came, proving with blood and steel that he was worthy of the crown. Edward would not disappoint. With the oath still fresh on his lips, he felt the invisible weight of responsibility settle on his young shoulders. His father saw something rare in him, not just bravery, but intelligence, not just a hunger for glory, but the innate instinct of a leader. And so, as he rose before the court and before history itself, Edward of Woodstock ceased to be merely a boy of royal blood. That day, he began forging the legend that would follow him until his final breath. The destiny of the Black Prince was beginning to take shape. Though the exact origin of the nickname Black Prince remains uncertain, it is believed to be linked to his black armor or his feared reputation on the battlefield. This title reflects both his striking presence and the lasting impression he left on allies and enemies alike. The distant thunder did not come from the sky, but from the earth. Thousands of horses and soldiers marched like a storm about to crash upon the fields of Crécy. It was August 26, 1346, and there, amid the scent of damp soil and the gleam of drawn blades, a boy of only 16 awaited his baptism of fire. Edward, now a warrior and not merely a prince, wore his black armor, gleaming under the sun like an omen of destruction. His father, King Edward III, had entrusted him with the command of a large part of the English army, a bold decision for someone so young. But age had never been a barrier for those destined for glory. The French cavalry charged, certain of victory, only to meet the fierce resistance of the English archers, whose longbows felled men and horses before they could even cross the field. Edward stood at the heart of the battle, sword in hand, giving orders, defending his lines, and inspiring his men. When warned that the young prince was in danger, the king himself refused to send reinforcements. "Let him win his glory or die trying," he is said to have declared. And Edward won. The English victory at Crécy not only crushed the French, but also proved that England's heir was forged for war. 10 years later, the setting had changed, but fate repeated itself. In 1356, on the plains of Poitiers, Edward once again led the English against France, and this time, the prize would be even greater. King John II of France, convinced of his army's superiority, charged into battle with blind confidence. But Edward was no mere commander. He was a master strategist. In a stroke of genius, he used the terrain to his advantage, weakened the French lines, and at the perfect moment, encircled and captured the enemy monarch himself. When King John II was brought before him, defeated and humiliated, Edward did not gloat. He treated his prisoner with courtesy, a gesture that would echo through the centuries as one of the greatest displays of medieval chivalry. Yet there, among the shadows of fallen banners and the groans of the wounded, one truth was undeniable. The Black Prince was not just a son of war. He was its master. Fate, at times, weaves its plots with threads of silk and steel, intertwining politics and passion in an inseparable embrace. For Edward, who had spent his life between battlefields and strategy chambers, marriage was not merely a matter of love, it was a matter of power. The chosen bride was not a foreign princess brought by cold, calculated treaties, but someone who already knew the halls and secrets of the court, Joan of Kent, his cousin. Known as the Fair Maid of Kent, Joan was no fragile lady in need of protection. Intelligent, charismatic, and with a past marked by controversy, including a turbulent previous marriage, she was, in truth, the only woman who could stand as an equal to the Black Prince. Their union was not just a bond of blood, but a carefully measured political move. By marrying Joan, Edward secured alliances within the English nobility, ensuring support for his name and his lineage. And if there was ever any doubt about their feelings for each other, one only had to see them together. Unlike so many arranged marriages, there was something more: companionship, respect, perhaps even true love. From this union, 2 sons were born, but it was the younger one, Richard, who would bear the weight of the crown. When Edward passed from this world before his father, his son inherited the throne as Richard II of England. Fate, however, enjoys playing with the hopes of men. Richard did not inherit his father's strength, nor his military skill. His reign would be marked by intrigue and turmoil, proving that the blood of a warrior does not always guarantee the glory of his descendants. But in that moment, as Edward and Joan exchanged vows before God and the court, the future was still a shining promise. The knightly prince and the fair lady were together, and for an instant, amid wars and conspiracies, there was peace. The glory of war always demanded its price, and Edward, the Black Prince, had begun to feel its weight. He was no longer the fearless young warrior who had triumphed at Crécy and Poitiers. Now, he bore the years of battle in both body and spirit. Ruling Aquitaine was nothing like leading an army. It was a more subtle battlefield, where swords were replaced by tributes and shifting loyalties. But war was never far away. In 1367, Spain became the new stage for his ambitions. Peter the Cruel, the deposed king of Castile, turned to Edward for help in reclaiming his throne. The offer was tempting: gold, land, influence. And so, with the same determination as always, the Black Prince marched his armies toward the Iberian Peninsula, ready for yet another moment of glory. The Battle of Nájera was a brutal spectacle of strategy and power. Under his command, the English and their allies crushed the French-backed forces of Henry of Trastamara, Peter's half-brother and usurper of the throne. The battlefield was stained red, and the victory was absolute. Once again, Edward proved his military genius beyond question. But not all victories come without cost. The promised gold never arrived. Peter the Cruel proved to be ungrateful and deceitful, leaving Edward with an exhausted army, an expensive campaign, and few resources to pay his men. The relentless heat of Spain, the unending strain, and the harsh conditions began to wear down his health. It was there that the first signs of his illness appeared: a lingering affliction, a treacherous fever that would never leave him. he returned to Aquitaine not as a victorious hero, but as a weary man, haunted by the dirty politics that eroded his triumphs. Spain had granted him a victory, but in return, it had taken something he could never regain: his strength, his endurance, and perhaps his fate. In the final years of his life, Edward suffered from a debilitating illness, possibly dysentery, which greatly weakened him. This condition limited his activities and forced him to withdraw from military and political affairs. He passed away on June 8, 1376, at the age of 45 before his father, preventing him from ascending to the throne. His son, Richard II, would later inherit the crown upon Edward III's death. The Black Prince is remembered as one of England's greatest medieval warriors, a symbol of chivalry and leadership whose legend endures through the ages.